The city glittered under the neon haze of another restless night, and in the heart of its towering skyline sat Victor Harlow, a man who believed himself untouchable. At 52, he was a millionaire many times over, a ruthless businessman whose empire stretched across industries. He had built his fortune not by kindness, but by crushing rivals and outsmarting competitors. To Victor, money was truth, and everything else was superstition. That night, however, fate took him somewhere he would never have chosen for himself. His limousine had broken down near an old market district, the kind of place he hadn't set foot in for decades. While his driver dealt with the car, Victor wandered, irritated, through narrow alleys lit by flickering street lamps. It was there he saw her, a woman draped in tattered shawls, sitting behind a table littered with candles, cards, and strange symbols etched into wood. Her eyes were sharp, far too aware, and they followed him as he passed. "Care for a reading, sir?" she asked softly, her voice carrying a strange weight. Victor smirked. "A reading? I don't believe in fairy tales." But something in her stare made him pause. Against his better judgment, he stepped closer. She laid out a set of cards with swift precision, her hands trembling slightly as if touched by some unseen current. The flickering candlelight caught the edge of her expression, grave, unshaken. "You will die tomorrow," she said finally, her voice firm, without hesitation. Victor froze, then erupted into laughter. "Die? Tomorrow? Lady, I'm in perfect health. I have more security guards than most politicians, and I make my own destiny. I don't need to fear your parlor tricks." She did not laugh with him. Her gaze bore into his, unwavering. "You cannot buy your way out of fate. The clock is already ticking." Annoyed, Victor tossed a bill onto her table. "Here's your payment for the performance." He turned away, his laughter echoing in the alley. But as he walked back to the car, the words clung to him, threading through the night air like a whisper he could not shake. "You will die tomorrow." The next morning, Victor Harlow awoke in his penthouse suite that crowned the skyline. Floor-to-ceiling windows bathed the marble floors in sunlight, while the city stretched out beneath him like his own personal kingdom. He stretched lazily, dismissing the memory of the fortune-teller's words as nothing more than a strange annoyance. Today was a day like any other, or so he thought. His calendar was stacked with meetings, contracts worth millions waiting for his signature, and calls with investors who hung on his every word. Victor thrived in this world of control. Every decision was calculated, every risk turned into profit. He was admired, envied, and feared in equal measure. His morning ritual was perfection. Imported coffee roasted to his exact specifications. A personal chef preparing breakfast no one else could afford. His staff moved silently, anticipating his needs before he voiced them. To the outside world, Victor's life was a portrait of success. But beneath the luxury, cracks were forming. His estranged children wanted little to do with him, his ex-wife despised him, and even his business partners trusted him only as far as they could profit from him. Still, Victor never let these truths trouble him. Money had always been enough to silence conscience and cover wounds. Yet as he looked at his reflection in the polished glass of his office, a strange unease crawled at the back of his mind. The fortune-teller's voice, though ridiculous, whispered through his thoughts. "You will die tomorrow." He tried to laugh it off. "Superstition," he muttered under his breath. "Nothing more." But when his assistant entered with the morning brief, Victor noticed her eyes flicker nervously. The staff seemed quieter than usual, as if some invisible tension hung in the air. And for the first time in years, Victor felt a fleeting pang of vulnerability. He straightened his tie and forced his trademark smirk. There was no room for weakness in his empire. And yet, deep inside, he couldn't deny it. No amount of money, no fortress of glass and steel, could protect him from words that sounded too much like fate. By the afternoon, Victor Harlow was no longer laughing. The words that had seemed absurd the night before now replayed in his mind like an echo he couldn't silence. "You will die tomorrow." He sat through meetings, but his focus wavered. Stock figures blurred on the projector, and even the voices of his board members faded into a meaningless hum. Every so often, his gaze flicked to the clock, measuring time, calculating how many hours until tomorrow arrived. Doubt gnawed at him. What if it wasn't superstition? What if the strange woman had known something he didn't? He had dismissed countless people before, critics, rivals, even family, but this warning felt different. It was personal, targeted, unsettling in its simplicity. By evening, the veneer of his confidence had cracked. He found himself staring at his own reflection in the penthouse glass, searching for signs of frailty. His heart skipped a beat at every creak of the building, every unexpected phone call, every shadow in the corner of his eye. At dinner, his food tasted like ash. The steak, imported and prepared perfectly, might as well have been cardboard. His appetite had fled, replaced by an unfamiliar sensation: fear. His chef asked if he was unwell, but Victor snapped, "Just leave me." The staff scattered, leaving him alone with his thoughts. That night, Victor scrolled through his phone, searching articles about psychics, predictions, and near-death experiences. He scoffed at most of what he read, yet his hand trembled as he tapped link after link. He even replayed their meeting in his mind, trying to remember if he had said anything to give her a clue about his life, anything she might have twisted into a vague prophecy. But she hadn't asked about him. She had only looked at him once, deeply, with a certainty that now terrified him. Victor tried to drown his fear with expensive whiskey, but the liquid did nothing to quiet his racing heart. As midnight drew closer, he stood at his balcony, staring at the sprawling city lights below. And for the first time in his life, Victor Harlow, the man who laughed at fate, was haunted by the possibility that tomorrow might never come. The morning sunlight usually brought Victor comfort, a daily reassurance that life continued as it should. But this morning was different. He woke with a start, his silk sheets tangled around him like ropes, his body slick with cold sweat. His first thought wasn't business, money, or deals. It was the woman's voice. "You will die tomorrow." He tried to dismiss it as paranoia. He showered, dressed in a tailored suit, and forced himself into routine. Yet as he left his penthouse, the first crack in his illusion of safety appeared. The chauffeur had pulled up his sleek black car as always. But when Victor stepped forward, the brakes screeched unexpectedly, the vehicle lurching inches from his legs. His driver paled, stammering apologies. "Sir, I swear it slipped." Victor waved him silent, heart hammering. It was a close call, too close. The kind of near accident that, on any other day, he would have dismissed with annoyance. But today it felt like a sign, a whisper of death brushing past him. In the boardroom, the omen lingered. Halfway through a presentation, the lights flickered, plunging the room into shadow for a breathless moment before buzzing back on. The executives muttered, joking about the building's wiring, but Victor's skin prickled. He felt watched, as though invisible eyes studied him from beyond the fluorescent glow. Later, while reviewing papers in his office, a framed photograph of his late parents fell from the shelf without reason, shattering glass across the floor. The timing was too cruel, too pointed, as though the universe itself mocked him with reminders of mortality. Victor poured himself a drink to steady his nerves, but even the amber liquid trembled in his glass, mirroring the tremor in his hands. He laughed, but it was hollow, brittle. His empire, his fortune, his control over everything suddenly seemed fragile, like glass just waiting to break. By evening, he sat alone in his study, staring at the shards of the broken frame still scattered on the carpet. For the first time, he admitted what he couldn't ignore. The countdown had begun. Victor was not a man accustomed to fear. 4 years, he had controlled markets, manipulated rivals, and bent fate to his will. Yet now, his empire seemed useless against an invisible clock he couldn't stop hearing in his head. Every tick felt like it belonged not to a watch, but to his own life slipping away. By morning, he could no longer pretend the voice had been a delusion. The string of omens, close calls, shadows, breaking glass, gnawed at him with relentless persistence. He needed answers, and he needed them fast. At first, he turned to the tangible. Doctors. He summoned the best in the city, insisting on a full-body exam, scans, blood work. They found nothing, no disease, no hidden condition, no explanation for his unease. "You're perfectly healthy," the lead physician assured him. But health wasn't protection from prophecy. Then, lawyers. Could someone be plotting against him? Could the warning have been a threat in disguise? They combed through contracts, rivals, enemies, but nothing pointed to danger more immediate than his own imagination. Still, the words haunted him. "You will die tomorrow." Finally, with his reason exhausted, Victor stepped into a world he would have once ridiculed, the world of mystics and seers. That evening, beneath the anonymity of a hooded coat, he entered the dim, incense-filled shop of a fortune-teller. The woman behind the crystal ball looked at him not with curiosity, but with recognition, as though she had been expecting him. "You've already been warned," she said before he spoke. "The shadow clings to you." Victor's chest tightened. "Then tell me how to stop it," he demanded. His voice cracked on the last word, desperation leaking through the armor of arrogance. The woman's gaze softened, almost pitying. "There is no stopping death, only choices in how you face it. But your thread is tangled with another's, someone you cast aside. To untangle it, you must return to her." Her words struck like thunder. He thought immediately of the woman he had dismissed with cruel laughter only days ago. The one who had spoken the curse into his ears. And for the first time, Victor realized he might have to beg her for salvation. Victor's chauffeur had never seen him this way before, restless, pacing, muttering under his breath as though bargaining with someone unseen. The polished exterior of the Millionaire was cracking, revealing a man consumed by dread. Every shadow seemed to lean closer. Every sound, even the creak of his mansion's grand staircase, felt like a countdown. He could no longer deny it. The prophecy wasn't a game. His empire, wealth, and power, all meaningless if he failed to survive the night. And survival, he now realized, lay not in contracts or doctors, but in the hands of the woman he had mocked. By twilight, he ordered the car to drive back into the forgotten part of the city, where her tiny shop waited like a trap. The streets grew narrower, darker, more claustrophobic with each turn. He pressed his forehead to the window, watching as glittering skyscrapers gave way to crumbling brick and flickering street lamps. The deeper he went, the more it felt like descending into another world entirely. But fear was not his only companion. Pride still lingered. As he approached the shop, he rehearsed his words, trying to weave humility into a voice unaccustomed to it. How does a man who has commanded boardrooms and governments now plead for mercy from a single woman? When he stepped inside, she was waiting. No surprise in her eyes, only that same unreadable calm. The scent of herbs and smoke hung heavy in the air, wrapping around him like a shroud. "You came back," she said softly, as if it had been inevitable. Victor swallowed hard, his throat dry. "You said I'd die tomorrow. The signs, they've already begun. Tell me what I need to do." Her gaze didn't waver. "You laughed when I warned you. Now you've felt the weight of the truth. But if you want my help, you must first surrender what you've never given up before." Victor frowned. "What is it you want?" She leaned closer, her whisper slicing through the silence. "Your control. Only when you let go of it can I show you the path." For the first time in his life, Victor felt the ground shift beneath him, not from power, but from powerlessness. Victor sat stiffly in the narrow wooden chair across from the fortune-teller, his silk suit and gold cufflinks absurdly out of place in the dimly lit room. The shadows from the flickering candles stretched across the walls, seeming to twist and breathe with each gust of air. The atmosphere pressed on him, a constant reminder that he was no longer in control. "What do you mean, surrender my control?" he asked, his voice breaking with a tremor he hated himself for. She studied him in silence, her fingers tracing the worn edges of a deck of cards lying on the table. Your control has built empires, she said, but it has also blinded you. To save yourself, you must hand over the very thing that defines you. Wealth, authority, ego, it must all be set aside. If you want to see another dawn, you must follow without question. Victor's instinct was to argue. He was not a man accustomed to obedience. His entire life had been about bending others to his will. Yet the memory of the strange omens, the mirror shattering without cause, the sudden collapse of his trusted business partner, burned in his mind. These were not coincidences. And if I refuse? He asked, his voice sharp. Then you will die, just as I said, she replied coldly. The prophecy is not a threat, but a certainty. You came to me because you already know this. The weight of her words hung between them. For the first time, Victor considered what surrender might mean. Could he truly release the reins he had clutched for decades? Would his power mean anything if he did not live to wield it? Slowly, he leaned forward, his jaw tight. Tell me what I must do. I'll follow your lead. Her lips curved in the faintest of smiles, though her eyes remained solemn. She gathered the cards and laid them on the table with careful precision. The bargain is struck, she whispered. But understand this, once you walk this path, there is no turning back. Victor felt a chill run down his spine. For the first time, he was not the master of the game, he was the pawn. The night descended heavy and suffocating, as though the sky itself conspired to smother the city in darkness. Victor's mansion, usually glowing with light and activity, stood eerily silent. Every servant had been dismissed, every door locked, every corridor swallowed by shadows. He had followed the fortune-teller's instructions precisely, though unease gnawed at him with every step. She had told him to wait for midnight. At that hour, the veil between life and death, past and future, would thin. If he was to survive the prophecy, he must endure the trial of shadows. Victor sat in his study, the grand clock on the mantel ticking loudly. Each second stretched into eternity. His palms sweated despite the cool air, and the fire in the hearth sputtered, shrinking instead of growing. Something unseen was draining the warmth from the room. At precisely midnight, the lights flickered and died. Victor's breath caught in his throat as a chorus of whispers filled the room, low, guttural voices speaking in a language he could not understand. His instinct was to shout, to command the darkness to obey him, but the fortune-teller's words echoed in his mind. Do not resist, or the shadows will consume you. Shapes slithered along the walls, stretching long fingers across the ceiling. One form lingered in the corner, darker than the rest, and Victor realized it was watching him. His chest tightened, his pulse thundering in his ears. The voices grew louder, a tide of sound that pressed against his skull. He dropped to his knees, clutching his head. What do you want from me? He gasped. From the dark corner, the figure moved forward. It did not walk. It glided, silent and inevitable. When it reached him, the whispers fell silent. A voice, cold and clear, filled the room. You laughed at death, it said, but death has not forgotten you. Tonight, you must choose, cling to what you were, or surrender to what you must become. Victor's throat tightened. He had thought wealth and power could shield him from anything, but here, faced with the abyss, he was stripped bare. The night of shadows demanded an answer. The mansion groaned as though it were alive, every beam and wall straining under an unseen weight. Victor stumbled back from the shadowy figure, his breath ragged, his heart pounding like a war drum. Midnight had passed, and with every tick of the mantel clock, he felt time unraveling around him. The fortune-teller's warning rang clear in his mind. When the hour strikes, you will face the choice no wealth can buy your way out of. The figure loomed closer, its face shrouded, its body no more than an outline of darkness. Yet its presence was suffocating, crushing. Victor fell to his knees again, this time not from terror, but from the unbearable weight of realization, he was powerless. "You begged for life," the voice intoned, echoing like 1,000 whispers at once. "But you built your empire on lies, betrayal, and greed. Do you still want to live, Victor Blackwell?" His name rolling from the shadows sent a shiver down his spine. No one, not even the fortune-teller, had spoken it aloud. He opened his mouth, but the truth wrenched itself free before he could craft a lie. "Yes," he whispered. "I want to live. I'll give up everything, my fortune, my power, if only I can survive." The darkness swirled, enveloping him. The walls of the study melted away until he stood in a vast void, the floor beneath him vanishing into nothingness. A single flame burned in the distance, a fragile light. "Then prove it," the voice thundered. "Step into the flame. Leave behind who you were." Victor's body shook. The flame looked so small, yet stepping into it felt like stepping into death itself. And maybe that was the point. He staggered forward, each step heavier than the last. The shadows clawed at his legs, desperate to pull him back. Finally, with one last ragged breath, Victor hurled himself into the light. The mansion's study reappeared in an instant. The clock struck 1. The shadows were gone. Victor collapsed to the floor, trembling, drenched in sweat. He was alive. But he knew he was no longer the man he had been. Death had spared him, only because he had surrendered everything that once defined him. The final hour had passed, but its echoes would haunt him forever.